All right. And of course, we're going to start with our traditional. Yeah, Jackie, don't forward any emails to George yet. Just send them to me. I'm going to have him check all the accounts that are questionable. He may even join us this evening, so that'll be a lot of fun. All right.
If we put it in the chat, do you still want an individual?
Yes, just send me an email if you're having an issue. But let's hold off on that until Wednesday. We have plenty of time, so there's no real need to panic. Let's hold off and recheck it on Wednesday, although the way it's set up, it should be active now, but it could be an account issue. Let's just go from there. All right. So anyway, just to complete, I didn't complete my explanation. The way the process will run, and I'll verify this when we meet, you pass the practice exam, 95% or above, and then you can go in and take the actual cert. And I think it is quite a bit lower for passing, but I'm not sure. I think 71% does sound right. And then once you've done that, then we do the same thing with Network Pro. We go through the Network Pro during week, whatever week it is. We go through the practice exam, 95%, and then you actually go ahead and take the actual cert. And then the CompTIA exams, you have to schedule that through me. I have to order a voucher through George, who orders it through the funding individuals. And then that one, you have to go down to the testing facility to take those exams, those CompTIA, the A+ and the Security Plus. Or are we doing Security Plus?
Do those ones consist of labs, those
Pardon?
tests? The
Yes.
CompTIA tests they do?
Yes, there are practice tests and test out for CompTIA.
Testing always makes me nervous.
Well, I can tell you now, the CompTIA is only harder because it's all multiple choice. And if you're nervous about multiple choice, then it's one of those tests that can trip you up. But I wouldn't worry about it. If you pass the PC Pro and the Network Pro on test out, you should not have any issue with the CompTIA. It's so, which is why we do it this way. They're both highly credible in the IT realms, but if you do good in the test out ones, you will do good in the CompTIA ones, because the only difference is that they're multiple choice and that.
Okay.
So, all right, let me check this other smoke detector. All right. Any other questions about the certification? These are important because this is essentially what you're working for, and I can guarantee you, if you come out of this class with those 4 certifications, I mean, it'll mean a lot on your resume, a lot, if you want to go the IT route. All right, so week 8, chapter 11, we're going into file and folder, file management and folder. So let's start our journey with the Windows file and folder properties video.
In this lesson, we're going to discuss the properties of files and folders within the FAT32 and NTFS file systems. These are the most commonly implemented file systems on the storage devices used within Windows systems. FAT32 is commonly used on flash drives, and NTFS is commonly used on hard drives and SSDs within a Windows file system. Both FAT32 and NTFS support long file names, so you can have a name up to 255 characters long. And that makes life a lot easier when you're naming your files and your folders. However, there's still some rules that you need to be familiar with when you're working with long file names. First of all, you use a period to separate the file or folder name from its extension. In addition, File and folder names are not case sensitive on FAT32 and NTFS file systems. For example, the file name widget_design.docx, all uppercase, is exactly the same file name as widget_design.docx, all lowercase. But this is not the case with other file systems. If you're working on a Linux system, then file names are case sensitive. On Linux, these two file names would be considered completely different files. Also, there are several reserved characters that you're not allowed to use within a file name. You can't use the less than sign, the greater than sign, a colon, a double quote, a forward slash, a backslash, the pipe character, a question mark, or an asterisk. So, with this in mind, we need to discuss the important role of the file name extension. By convention, certain file extensions on Windows systems are mapped to certain applications by default. These are called file associations. These file associations specify which applications will be used by default to open a particular type of file, and that type of file is identified by the extension. On Windows systems, there are several commonly used file associations that are set up by default. For example, if you see a file that has an extension of exe or com, that tells us that these files are executable files that you can run directly to launch an application. If, on the other hand, you see a file that has a DLL extension, that tells us that this file is a dynamic link library. A DLL contains pre-compiled code functions that can be used by other applications running on the system. A file with the MSI extension is an application installation file. A TXT extension indicates a text file, and RTF indicates a rich text file. If you see a file that has an extension of doc or docx, those are Microsoft Word files. A file with an extension of PPT or PPTX is a Microsoft PowerPoint file. PDF is an Adobe Acrobat file, and JPEG, BMP, PNG, and TIFF are image files. You should also be familiar with some scripting file name extensions as well. Scripting file types contain executable data. The data is made up of strings, which are the sequence of characters that make up each command. Different data types make up these files, such as numbers. If you see a file that has a BAT extension, that tells us that this is a batch file. A batch file is really just a special text file. It's actually an executable text file, and that text file simply contains a list of other real commands that need to be run. A PS1 is a script file used by Windows PowerShell. A VBS is a Visual Basic script. These may contain basic loops which allow you to run lines of code repeatedly. An SH is a Linux file that has a script program for Bash. A PY is a script written in Python. These are usually for programming web servers. And a JS is a text file containing JavaScript code. This is just a sample of all of the different file associations. There are many others. Here's the important thing you need to understand. On a Windows system, these extensions are associated with certain applications by default. If you double-click a file in a File Explorer, its associated application loads automatically. For example, you can see here that a file with an extension of MP3 will automatically be loaded in the Groove Music Player on this Windows 10 system. Now, understand that these associations are not static. You can manually change which application is associated with a particular file extension. In Windows 10, you can do this by going into Settings, selecting Apps, and then selecting Default Apps. So with this in mind, let's now discuss the concept of attributes. Understand that every file and folder in the file system has attributes that can be enabled or disabled to control how that file or folder behaves. Some of the key attributes you need to be familiar with are listed here. First of all, we have the hidden attribute. The hidden attribute causes the file or folder to be hidden when it's browsed with File Explorer or when listing the directory with the dir command at the command prompt. Another file attribute is the system file attribute. When this file attribute is enabled, it indicates that the file is a protected operating system file. There's also an attribute called read only. Turning this attribute on allows the file or folder to be opened and read, but no changes can be saved to it. The archive tells backup programs that this file or folder has been changed since the last time the backup ran and, therefore, needs to be included in the next backup process. On Windows systems, you can also enable the encryption attribute. Encryption encrypts a file or folder using the encrypting file system. There's also an attribute called compress. When enabled, the compress attribute compresses a file or folder to save disk space. And there's the index attribute, which tells Windows that it needs to include a particular file or folder in its search index, which is used to increase speeds when you're doing file system searches. Here's an important thing that you need to remember. A given file or folder can have multiple attributes enabled at the same time, with a few exceptions. For example, a file could have the read-only attribute and the compress attribute enabled at the same time. It could even have the read-only, compress, and index attributes enabled at the same time. The one exception to this rule regards the encryption and compression attributes. A file or folder can have one or the other of these attributes enabled, but not both at any given time. So, a file or folder can be encrypted or it can be compressed, but it can't be both at the same time. And that's it for this lesson. In this lesson, we discussed file and folder properties on the Windows system. We looked at file names, file associations, and file attributes.
All right. Yes, there's a lot to file and folder management. It's always an interesting scenario when you're having to deal with that. So let's go ahead and start our lab. Our first lab for the evening. Test out. And our first lab, again, to where we need to go. It's going to be 11.2.5. And that's manage files. All right, so let's start that. And you do have a homework lab for this week, and it's a Linux lab, so have fun with that. Now we will do one. So in this lab, with the IT admin, the employee office, one needs you to set attributes on files and folders. We're going to set attributes according to these instructions. Compress the D graphics folder and all of its contents. Hide the D finance folder. Make the following files read only. 2017 report.xlsx, which is an Excel file, and the 2018 reports. So let's go ahead and launch our lab. All right. So whenever you're dealing with files and folders, you want to go into the File Explorer. That's probably the best way to get to at least the GUI portion of managing files and folders. So the first thing we want to do is we want to compress the D graphics folder. So the best thing to do is to locate that folder. Generally, if you expand this PC, you'll see all of your default general documents, desktop download, music, pictures, videos. Those are default locations. And then you have your D drive here. You want to expand that. You see all of our folders here. In the navigation portion, if you click on the drive itself, you'll see all of the drives in your working area here. So the first thing we want to do is compress the D graphics folder. So right click, go into properties. This is the way that I would do it. There's other ways. And then if you go into security, and then into advanced security, no, I think that's, I've forgotten how to do this myself, so. Let me back up a little bit. You want to go into the General tab, and then under the General tab, you see your read-only attributes and hidden. You have to go into the Advanced tab under the General tab to get to your Advanced attributes, and then within your Advanced attributes, and as she said or stated, you can either compress or encrypt, but you can't do both, even though it does give you the checkbox. So we want to compress that folder and all of its content. So you basically select the compressed contents to save disk space and OK. Now it doesn't really give you an indication here, but we have now compressed that graphics folder. All right. and apply. And it'll give you the warning that you have chosen to make the following attribute changes. You're basically compressing the folder, and it gives you the choices. Apply the changes to this folder and subfolders, which means that you're going to compress everything under that folder. And just click OK, and then OK. So we just did that, compress the dgraphics folder. Once again, it doesn't really give you an indication here. In some Windows systems, you'll see that that file type has changed, but I don't know if we can, yeah, we can't really change the view, but that's fine. We know we went through the steps. So the next thing we want to do is hide the D finances folder. And you saw that attribute already. Right click on the folder, properties, and under the general tab, there's a hidden attribute. So you want to select that. It's a checkbox. And this is also read only. That's fine. And make sure you click apply and then OK. So now the finances folder is hidden. And so we want to make the following files read only in the finances folder. So we can double click on that folder. It'll open up the folder and show us the contents. And we have 2017, 2018, and 2019 reports. So if we right click on the actual file, it has the same type of controls that we can invoke on the file itself. So if we go into properties, and under the general tab, it has all the properties, size, when it was created, etc. You do have the attributes read only and hidden. So we want this file to be, because that's the 2017 report, read only, apply, and OK. And we want to do the same thing with the 2018 report. Properties, general tab, read only, apply, OK. Any questions about that lab? And let's score it. We did good, right? Everyone did good? Okay,
Yes.
Yep.
great. All right, so let's go on to our next video. And that is 11.3.1. All right. Who's got the smoke detector? I think I disabled all of mine, but we're still having issues. Well, I have about 5 of them in this house. Yeah. I have to figure out which one is creating the chirping. All right. Share screen. Where's my browser? All right. So our next video is NTFS permissions, good old Windows permissions. Definitely useful. So please pay close attention. My systems are going haywire. All right. Okay, here we go.
One of the key advantages of NTFS as a file system is that it provides permissions at the file and folder level. And that's what we're going to talk about in this lesson. FAT32 does not provide permissions in the file system. There may be situations when you want FAT32, but for the most part, you're going to be much happier with NTFS because you can control access to the file system at the file and folder level using the permissions that NTFS provides. There's a couple of different concepts that you need to understand in order to understand how these permissions work.
The first of these is the concept of ownership. Remember that NTFS uses Windows users and groups to decide who can do what with a given file or folder in the file system. Intrinsic with users and groups is the concept of ownership. The user who creates the file or folder automatically becomes that file's or folder's creator owner. The creator owner has full access to the particular file or directory. They can do anything they want with that file or directory. You cannot take ownership of a file or folder from another user unless you have the take ownership permission, which is assigned automatically to administrator. With ownership, you can even modify the permissions on the file or folder that you created because you have full access. You can actually block administrator from your stuff by modifying the permissions assigned to administrator to those files or folders, and you can block them out so they can't see your stuff. Well, as an administrator, you probably don't want that to happen. And if somebody does that, you want to be able to take ownership back so you can see what they're doing in the file system. Windows offers an option for taking ownership that's assigned to administrator by default, so you can take ownership of the files and directories and manage them. That way, your users can't hide things from you. In addition to ownership, we also have permissions in the NTFS file system. Every NTFS file or directory has a list of users who are associated with it. This list is also called the Access Control List, or ACL. The ACL not only specifies a list of users who are associated with a particular file or directory, but also lists what level of access each of those associated users has. And these are permissions. There are several different permissions that you can use. Let's take a look. A permission sounds just like what it is. A permission specifies what a given user has permission to do in the file system. There are actually two different sets of permissions. The first set are permissions that are assigned to folders or directories. The first folder permission is full control. A user who has the full control permission to a folder can do anything they want inside that folder. They can delete it, rename it, add things to it, take things out of it, and move it. The next folder permission is modify. A user who has the modify permission to a folder can do anything that they want to that folder except change permissions or take ownership of files and subfolders. The next one is read and execute. Read and execute is interesting because it actually flows down to the files that are actually inside the folder. If you have read and execute permissions, then you can see the contents of a folder and any of its subdirectories. And you can also execute an executable file that's inside of the directory, but you can't do anything else. You can't delete files or add files. All you can do is look at them and execute them. There's another permission for folders called list folder content. This one's very similar to read and execute. All it does is allow a particular user to see the contents of the folder and any subfolders that are inside of it. That's all they can do. The next permission is the read permission. The read permission allows the user to open any file in the folder and look at it. You're able to read that file. The next permission is the write permission. The write permission allows you to modify any existing files that are inside the folder, and it allows you to create new files and folders inside that folder. Using these permissions, you can customize users' access to the files and folders inside your NTFS file system. It's also important to remember that these permissions are cumulative. That means you can assign one or more permissions for a given file or folder to a user account. And the end level of access is the combination of all the permissions that you can assign. For example, if you were to assign read and write permissions, that would allow a user to read any file in the given folder and would also allow them to modify existing files and create new files and folders. So you can pick and choose. Which one do you want them to be able to have in order to accomplish the work that they need to do? In addition to folder permissions, there are also file permissions, and they're very similar to folder permissions, but the way that they work is a little bit different. As with folder permissions, there's a file permission called full control. And just as with folders, full control permission gives the associated user the permission to do anything they want with that particular file. They can delete it, edit it, and move it. They can do whatever they want to do. And there's also a file permission called modify. The modify permission allows the user to do anything except take ownership or change the permissions assigned to a given file. If you have full control, you can do those two things. If you have modify, you can do anything except those two things, taking ownership or changing permission. There's also a file permission called read and execute, which allows you to open a file. And if the file isn't executable, it allows you to run it. There's also a file permission that's just simply read. And just as with folder permissions, the read file permission allows you to open and view the contents of a particular file. And then if you want to be able to edit the file and save the changes, you need the write permission. Write allows you to open a file, make changes to it, and save it. In this lesson, we talked about NTFS folder and file permission, and we talked about the concept of ownership.
All right. Any lingering questions about ownership and file permissions? Of course, you're waiting to do the lab on that particular aspect. All right.
Does a normal Windows license does this?
Yes, this is a normal Windows license system, as these types of permissions. And now keep in mind that it depends upon the users that are set up, and we'll talk about users and all that, because it's really specific to users, who has access to what, et cetera. And that can even go different levels within the network itself, Active Directory, all kinds of things. But on the Windows system itself, you can actually set up a user associated permission system based on the files that you want to provide access to for specific individuals. Okay, so this next lab, we're gonna configure NTFS permissions. We're an IT administrator for a small corp. There are two groups of users who access the computers in the support office, the day group and the night group. Each group has a corresponding folder on the computer, D-Day data and D-Night data, respectively. So we've been asked to help configure appropriate access for each folder, for each group. So in this lab, we'll be tasked to complete the following: turn off the permission inheritance. And permission inheritance is something that essentially, if you have folders, subfolders, and files, it will inherit, each level will inherit the permission by the parent folder. And generally, that's why it's recommended that if you're setting permissions, you want to start at the highest level. And then you can, either separate or just allow the inheritance, which is normally the case. If you're providing access to one level of folder, you're providing access to all the content of that particular folder. Right, so we're going to turn off inheritance for both D-Day data and D-Night data, and convert the existing permission as explicit permissions. And you'll see how we do that. Remove the users group from the access control list, so that's what ACL is, of each folder. Add the appropriate group, day group or night group, to the folder. Assign full control over each folder to the appropriate group, and do not change any other permissions assigned to other users or groups. That is a mouthful. All right. So we want to go into our File Explorer and take a look at our D drive. And we have the appropriate folders, D data, or day data, night data. Okay, so we want to turn off the permissions inheritance for both of the folders. So we want to go into properties, and essentially under the security tab, and this is where you go to advanced, you see there's a button here near the bottom where we're disabling inheritance. So we're at the top level, so if you click that, now you're giving that, two options: convert inherited permissions into explicit permissions on this object, which is what we want, which means that it's converting any type of inheritance to whatever we set. And then there's remove all inherited permissions, which is the other option. So we want to take the first option. We click that, that removes the inheritance. And as you know, the disable goes to enable. And we don't want to replace all the child object permission entries with inheritable permissions. That's what we don't want. All right. So let's go ahead. Well, we're going to do this to the other folder too, but you notice that we were asked to remove the users group from the ACL of each folder, access control list. So you can go ahead and remove the users group here, highlight it, users group, and the middle button is remove, go ahead and remove it. So we accomplished those 2 steps in this area, which is fine. There's other ways to do that as well. I'm just trying to create a more efficient way. So make sure you apply and OK. And then finally, OK here. And then we have to do the same for our night data folder. Right-click Properties, Security, Advance, Disable Inheritance, convert inherit permissions to explicit permission for each object, and then go ahead and remove the users group, apply, and OK. So now we've accomplished the first 2 steps in the lab, disabled inheritance, and then remove the users group. So now we want to add the appropriate group. Now this is the actual group. There's a group named day group and night group. So we want to add that to our access list here. And we have administrators, creator, and these are default. Usually the administrators has access to everything. The owner, creator, yes. So the first thing we want to do in here, we want to click on this edit button to change permission. Click on the edit. This will open it up to we're on the night data, and we're doing this kind of reverse. I figured we just start here. So we do want to add a group. We want to add the actual night group to this night data folder. So click the add button. Now, this is, if this group has been created, then you can find it by doing an object name check. So type in night. You can try night, see if it finds that. Now, and if it doesn't find it, which means it's looking for a specific name, just try typing in the whole name of the group and do a check name. And if it's a part of the setup in Windows, it will underline it and add a semicolon, which means that it has been set up as a group on this system or some other method. So then we know that that's what we want here. So we go ahead and click OK. The one thing it is asking us to assign full control over each of the folders to their appropriate group. So we have night group in here, as you see, and it's highlighted. So we want to go down here and make sure that full control is checked, and that will check all the other boxes as far as permissions. All right, night group, full control, night data folder, apply, and OK. So night group is in here, and if we highlight it, you see it has full control. And then we can just simply OK out of there. Yeah. So now we have to do the same for the day data folder. Right-click Properties, excuse me, Security, Edit, Add, Day Group, check name, looks good. Okay, it adds it to our list, our ACL, full control, right? Apply, and okay. Day group is here, looks good. Okay, so now we've added full control over each group for each, full control over the folder for each group, the day group and the night group. And the last thing is do not change any other permissions assigned. So we're not going to do anything else. So we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and score it. And we're looking pretty good. Any questions about that? Are we all good?
All good.
All right, good job.
All good.
All good. So our next video, 11.4.6, no, 11.4.1. And we are, you may or may not have 11.5.1 on your lesson plan. I just added that tonight. That's the Linux video. I think it's actually useful to watch that one because that'll help you with the homework. So our next video is 11.4.1, and that is our shared folders. Oh, this is always a lot of fun. So this one, pay close attention because there's a specific process that tests out uses that actually is different than what I use, but supposedly it's the right way. I guess my way is the right way. Oh well. But we will follow the instructions as indicated by the video and the study guide for shared folders. All right, here we go.
In this lesson, we're going to talk about shared folders because you may want to make your data available to other users on your local area network. You can do this by sharing folders from your local hard drive. Before sharing a folder, you need to enable file and print sharing in Windows. Share permissions are used to control user access to files in your shared folder. Shared permissions are read. A user with read permissions can browse, read, copy, and run programs from within a folder. With the change permission, a user has read permissions plus the ability to write, create, and delete from the folder. A user with full control can act as the owner of the folder. You can share a folder by modifying its properties. Windows provides a default shared folder called public. Also, you may choose to share your media, pictures, videos, and music with other users, in which case you're given read access to your pictures, music, and video. Media is streamed to them but cannot be copied. Permissions assigned to a folder propagate to the contents of the folder. NTFS security permissions offer a greater degree of control. NTFS permissions can apply to folders, individual files within folders, and system users. Users must be granted share permissions first to access data in a shared folder. NTFS permissions apply to network as well as local users. NTFS special permissions can allow or deny access to a user or a group of users, in which case the deny permission always overrides any allow permission. For security, you should apply the principle of least privilege. The principle of least privilege means that you give a user only those privileges that are essential to that user's work. You can manually share a folder using the Share tab in File Explorer. To access a shared folder on a network, you must know the host name, the name of the computer hosting the share, and the share name. A Universal Naming Convention path, or UNC path, connects you to a share on a host. It looks like this, // and the host name, the NetBIOS name of the computer or its IP address, and a / followed by the name of the share. You can also connect to a share prompt with a netuse command. A netuse command looks like this, netuse. In this case, we map logical drive Z, to a share called data on a server called server. A useful command line parameter is the persistent command /persistent : yes. This remaps drive letter Z to the shared data on the host computer server every time I start Windows. Adding a $sign to the end of the new share's name will make that share an administrative share that is only accessible using a UNC path. Users can't browse to an administrative share. The default admin shares, such as C $, are only accessible to the members of the administrative group. Plan your shares carefully and only allow access on an as-needed basis. Proper share management enhances system and network security. Now, let's review what we've talked about in this lesson. In this lesson, we introduced you to shared folders, we explained share permissions, NTFS permissions, the principle of least privilege, and administrative shares.
Okay. Administrative shares. All right, so let's go right into our share lab. This one is a little tricky, but I'm pretty sure we can make it through. All right. Share and secure folders. So in this lab, we have a lot to do, but it's not too insurmountable. We're the IT admin. Employee in Office 1 needs to share 2 folders to make the folders available to users throughout the network. In this lab, we're tasked to share the folders and configure both both share and NTFS permissions to control access as follows. The D-Finances folder only to Emily Perry. Emily Perry user account should have all permissions to the shared folder. No other users should be allowed to access either over the network or locally, and that is important. And then the D graphics folder, all users should be able to view and open files in the shared folder. Sam Johnson, specific user account, should be able to edit, save, and delete files in the folder. And this is just a recap of what we're wanting to accomplish in this lab. All right. So go ahead and open up our File Explorer. And we're impacting the finances and the graphics folder in D. So let's go ahead and just navigate down to that. Drive, finances, and graphics. All right. So the first thing we want to do is share the folders. And with the way that this is ran, let's start with the finances. You want to right click, and this is a little tricky, but this is the way that they want us to share the folders. Our share scenario is what's known as give access to. So right click, select give access to, and then go ahead and open up specific people. And now this actually goes to our network access. Choose people on your network to share with. Essentially, this is based on network users, etc. So we know that we're going to do things like remove inherited permissions. We've done that before. We're going to remove the users group. We should know how to do that. And then we're going to add Emily as the only person to access this folder. So let's go ahead and add her first, since this is the way they would like for us to share this folder. So once again, we want to go ahead and type in Emily's name and check. And from here, you want to go ahead and go, no, we don't want to go into advanced, that's confusing. Go ahead and click OK, and you notice that we have Emily here, and she's read-only, but we want to change her to read-write, at least at this point. So we're actually accomplishing a couple things. We're adding that individual to the folder, and then we're going to share it. You see the icon, or little button here, share. Go ahead and click share there. It gives you the UNC, it's Office One Finances, it's shared on the network, and does give notifications. You can do that as well. And then click done. So we know that that folder, that finances folder, is now shared, but we need to do all these other steps. Remove the inherited permissions, remove the users group, all those things we did before on that finances folder. So right click, into properties, into security, and we see that we have it, Emily there, just to make sure. Into advanced, we want to disable inheritance. And so inherited permissions, converting existing permissions. So convert inherited permissions into explicit. We want to select that. Here we can also, once again, remove the users. So we're tasked to remove the users here. So go ahead and remove them. We still have Emily, full control. So go ahead and apply and OK. Double check and OK. So now we've satisfied all these three major steps on that folder. We removed everyone but Emily. She's the only one that has access to that folder. And now we're going to go to the graphics folder. So we're asked to do not modify inherited permissions, so we don't have to go into that in advance and change anything as far as inheritance. We want to share it. Remember, we're still sharing the folder and we want to add Sam Johnson. So once again, right click, give access to specific people, and we want to find them, not everyone, and we want to find Sam Johnson, all right? And he's there, and okay, go ahead and give him read write at that level. There was one other condition in here. It says we don't want to allow him full control. We just want to allow him modify. Now, how many of you remember the difference between full control and modify?
You can't reassign permissions
Yeah,
or take ownership.
yeah, you can do everything else. You cannot take ownership or reassign permissions, but you can edit, you can launch executables, etc. So make sure you go through, click on the share button and then the done for your graphics folder. But we do have to change his access because right now he has full access. So go into your security. You see the Sam Johnson's here. You want to edit him and take away full control and allow him to just modify, right? My mouse doesn't want to work right. So we just took away full control, modify only, apply, okay. And if you want to check that, you see that everything is good there, okay. And so now we've satisfied, we shared the folders and added those specific users. So they have those permissions allocated for those two folders. So let's go ahead and store. Looks pretty
Wait,
good.
with regards to the last one on the D graphics with Sam Johnson,
Yes.
I was trying to do the modify so that, oh, I found it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions about the folder permission, the share folder? Just remember, essentially, if you're trying to do this on your system, you have to make sure that you have share. There's a prompt that you have to enable if you're creating shared folders, and you only need to enable it once. And if you look at the study guide, it essentially talks about that. But make sure that you have the sharing, Windows sharing enabled to go through that sharing process. Excuse me. All right. Okay, so on to our next, let's see, our next video. No, we have another lab. Oh, this lab is fun. We just did 11.4.6, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now there's a little bit of a twist. We are going to go into command prompt. We're going to do 11.2.9. Instead of using your file explorer, we're going to use the command prompt, which is essentially what we used to do in the old days. Even after Windows 95 came out, we would still primarily do everything via the command prompt. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. All right, so we're going to go back a little bit, go back to 11.2.9. It's still a manage file and folders, but we're going to do an old school on it. So basically, we're still the IT admin. We're still dealing with Employee Office 1 with those files and folders. On this lab, we're going to use a command prompt to complete the following. We're going to create a directory or create a folder using the MD. We're going to remove a directory or remove a folder using the RD command with the slash S switch, which basically says remove all the subfolders. We're going to hide the following folders using the trib command, and you probably, I'll give you the commands for those, but they're pretty straightforward. But you'll probably, I'll go through them pretty quickly here, but you'll probably need to review these. Well, just to let you know, you don't see too many instances where you're using the command prompt to do file and folder management anyway. We'll go ahead and go right into it. And hopefully you've all at least looked into these anyway. So the lab will launch a command prompt, and it takes us to our user administrator, which is essentially generally the default landing command as far as a prompt. And the first thing we want to do is create a folder using the MD command. So, and that's going to be D utilities recover. And you can actually do this from your C user administrator. So you can type in MD space and then D : // you know, see that, and then utilities, LITIES, and then recover. So that's MD space D : utilities recover. Pretty straightforward. Hit enter, and it should not give you an error. So let's check to make sure that folder is there. So if you type in just D : at the prompt, it'll take you to the D drive. And if you type in, you could either type in dir, that'll give you a list of directories, and you see that we have a utilities there. And then you can also type in cd, which is change directories, and change that to utilities. And that will open up the utilities folder. And you can type in a dir again there, and you see that we have a recover folder as well. So we were successful there. All right. So now we want to remove a directory. And once again, since we're an admin, we can actually remove the directory from in it, as long as you're not within the directory. So use the RD, which is remove directory, and then type in the path. And that's known as a path, the regular DOS or Windows path. So we are removing software / archive, probably 98. So remove directory D : /software / arc98. Oh, it says the directory is not empty. Aha. So if you just do that, it won't delete the folders, but we have to use a switch. And the switch will say delete the folder and everything in it. So if you do the up arrow in DOS, it'll return the last statement, and just add a space and add your switch, which is a /s. And this is just forcing it to remove everything in that folder and all of its content. And it'll prompt you to say, are you sure you wanted to delete this? Because it's going to remove everything. You click on, you enter a Y and enter, and now that folder and all of its contents are gone. And to check that, we can do a CD, change directory, and a double period. That'll take you back, or you can type in a D there. And let's see if we can change to this software. Oops. Well, we can just go to software, since there's more folders in there as opposed to ARC98. And then if we go to try to go to ARC98, it'll say that the system cannot find this path, which means it's gone. That folder and its content is gone. All right. Okay, so we want to hide the following files. Generally, yes, you'll do this. I've hardly ever done any hidden files from the command prompt. But this is where you use a trib. I have to remember now. It's H. Is it plus H? Or is it 0 plus H? I can't even remember my commands anymore. Or is it just H?
You're right. It's plus H.
Thank you, Carol. And then your path. So the first file that we're hiding is D software and AP config, AP comp executable, and hit enter. And we did not receive an error. So I'm assuming that we're good there, although we're already in software. So, and now we're going to hide 2 other files. So I'm just going to use the up arrow to bring back that command, and then just use the backspace. We want D and command start config, command strt.cfg, enter. And then finally, I just hit the up arrow again. We want to hide that D start bat strt.bat, enter. So now all of those files are now hidden. If you did went into those folders and did a dir, you would not see dir without and an additional switch. You would not see those files. So let's just check just to make sure. Well, actually, they're showing on here, but start that and come start config. Oh, because we're administrator and we probably have access to all the files, but that's how you would hide them. We're going to stick with that. All right, so continuing, set the following files to read only. Read only is R as opposed to H. So we do the same things. So, and the attrib, and that's attribute command, and this is plus R. Wait. Oh, now my keyboard's frozen. There we go. That's R, and then our files. D. Software. Colon. Soft config. .config. Enter. And we want to do the same thing to our pixel config. Pixel. .config. Enter. Phew, that's a lot of typing. Any questions about the command line and the attribute command? I would definitely, if you have a chance, look up the attrib command, because there's so many things you can do with that as far as file and folders. If you're stuck with a command prompt, which you probably won't, but it will kind of help. It may help you with Linux if you're dealing with a Linux system. So let's go ahead and store. Yay. Any questions about that? Are we all good? All good?
Yep.
Good, good, good. All right. Now we're going to transition to a Linux system, but I'm going to go ahead and show the Linux video. And just to let you know, I'm going to show the Linux video. We're going to go through the Linux lab. It'll be pretty pretty quick, then we'll have our break. And then I'm going to review some of the packet tracer that we've done thus far. And yes, you will have a packet tracer challenge this evening. Usually I want to challenge you on Monday, where I'm going to give you some conditions and you have to create the scenario within your packet tracer and then send that to me once you've completed. All right. So let's take a look at the Linux video. This will help you both in this lab and the homework lab. Remember, you do have a homework lab. And just a reminder, we've changed our policy. I haven't said anything about this, but we changed the policy so that we're going to, well, I'm going to ask you to, excuse me, to actually run one of your homework labs. Everyone will have to run, everyone will have to, are required to run at least 1 or 2 homework labs before we get to the PC Pro, well, each of the sections. So meaning that I'm gonna have you share your screen and you're going to run the class through one of the homework labs. And I'm in the process of assigning everyone one over the next couple of weeks. We'll probably start next week. And we'll spend most of the class just having, well, some of the class, just having some of you walk through some of the homework labs. And these that counts for the previous homework labs. There's only, what, 25 of them. So I know there's enough that everyone will have one chance at least. So prepare yourself for that. I will probably start that. I may start on Wednesday, but definitely by Monday. So. And it's just the homework labs, the ones that we haven't gone through in class. All right. So let's go ahead and watch the Linux. And those of you that don't know, Linux is another operating system, actually based on the old Unix. And in IT, you may run into a scenario. It's rare, but if you're interested in cybersecurity, absolutely, because we use several systems that are all Linux. Pen testing, recon, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so let's go ahead and watch the Linux video, and then we'll do the Linux lab and we'll take a break.
In this demonstration, we're going to spend some time learning how to manage files and directories in the file system using shell commands. The first command we want to look at is the pwd command. It's a very simple command, but sometimes very useful. PWD stands for present working directory. I press enter, and it tells me what my current directory is. Now, you'll note that the command prompt itself up here does include the current directory. You might be asking, well, where is that? I don't see /home/rtracy anywhere. It's right here. See that little tilde? That tilde is a shortcut that says we are currently in the home directory of whatever user is logged in. Now, I'm currently logged in as the rtracy user, so my home directory is /home/rtracy. If I were logged in as the ksanders user instead, then this tilde would be a shortcut to /home/ksanders. So anytime you see a tilde there, just understand that it's talking about the home directory of the current user. The next command we want to look at is the ls command. ls is short for list. The ls command is used to display the contents of a directory. It shows all the files in that directory, as well as any subfolders that might be in that directory. And because I don't specify any other directory to list, it's going to assume that I want to list the contents of the current directory, which is /home/rtracy. Let's go ahead and do that. And notice that I have several different types of files and folders in my home directory. I have a folder called desktop. I have a folder called downloads, music, templates, documents. This is very similar to what you would find in the home directory of a user on a Windows system. Pictures, public, and videos. How do I know these are directories? Well, they're colored blue. Anything you see here that's blue is a directory. I also have a file here named Project Sched, which is short for Project Schedule. How do I know that's a file? Because the name of the file is white. That tells me that it's just a standard file. I also have another file over here in green called Hello World. Because it's green, I know that this file is an executable. It's a command that I can run from the shell prompt that will do something. Now, if I want to view the contents of a different directory, I type the ls command, but then provide the path to the directory that I want to list. For example, if I want to view the contents of the /var directory, I type ls space, and then the name of the directory /var. And notice that the output is very different. That's because I'm listing a completely different directory. The output of the ls command in this instance was a listing of the files and folders in /home/rtracy, but because I told the ls command this time to go out and look in a different directory, it provided different output. These are all the files and folders located in the /var directory. Now there are a couple of useful options you can use with the ls command. One of the most useful, in my opinion, is the -l option. -l causes ls to reformat its output in a long listing format, which allows us to view additional details about the files and folders in the directory being listed. Notice here we have the same folders and files listed in the output of the ls-l command as we did before, but we see a lot more information about them. For example, for the project schedule file, here are the permissions assigned to the file. Here is the user and group that owns the file. Here's the size of the file, and here's the last time that file was modified. Another useful option is the -a option. This causes ls to list all files in the specified directory, including those that are hidden. If I press enter, you notice that several additional files and folders are listed now that were not shown before. And all these files and folders that were not showing up before have one characteristic in common, and that is the fact that they have a period at the beginning of their file or folder name. Any file or folder on Linux that begins with a period is a hidden file or folder, and you can't see it by default. But by adding -a on the ls command, I can see all files and folders in the directory being listed. So to this point, we've talked about the pwd command and we've talked about the ls command. Let's now talk about the cd command. The cd command works in exactly the same way on a Linux system as it does on a Windows system. The cd command is used to change directories. That's what cd stands for. So currently, we run the pwd command again, we see that I'm in the /home directory. Well, what if I want to change over to this directory that we looked at earlier, the /var directory? To do that, I would use the cd command. I would type cd and then the name of the directory that I want to switch to. In this example, we're going to switch to the /var directory. I press enter. Notice that the prompt changed here. Instead of a tilde that we had before, now we have var. That tells me the name of the current directory. If I type the pwd command, I can see that my current directory is /var. If I type ls with no arguments, it displays the listing of the current directory, which is /var. Now, in this example, I used what's called an explicit path, meaning that I started at the top of the file system, which is the / directory, the root directory, and then the name of the subdirectory, which is var. I can also use relative directories with the cd command. For example, let's suppose I want to change into the games subdirectory here within /var. If I wanted to use an explicit path, I would type /var /games, and I could switch into the games directory. But because we're already in var, I can actually just type games at this point. And the cd command is going to say, okay, well, he didn't provide any path information to the games directory, so I'm going to assume that it is the games subdirectory of the current directory. If I hit enter, I'm changed into /var /games. Now, another shortcut you can use with the cd command is the ..dot option. Now, .dot refers to the parent directory of whatever directory I'm in. Now, a single dot refers to the current directory. So if I type cd dot and type the pwd command, you see I didn't go anywhere because dot refers to whatever the current directory is. It doesn't matter. But if I type ..dot, that tells the cd command to go up one level in the directory structure. So right now I'm in /var /games. If I press enter and now do the pwd command, you see that I'm in the /var directory. I went up one level in the hierarchy. I'm going to switch back to my home directory. Remember, the tilde is a shortcut for the home directory of whatever user is currently logged in. I could type cd /home/rtracy, and that'd be fine. It would take me to my home directory, but it's a lot faster just to type cd tilde. And now, notice I'm back in /home/rtracy. The next command we want to look at is the cp command. Let's do an ls here to view a listing of files. The cp command copies files or folders. For example, let's suppose I want to copy this file right here to the /var directory that we were just in. To do this, I would type cp, and then I would type the name of the file to be copied. I'm going to use the tab complete feature of the shell to finish typing the file name because I'm lazy and I don't want to type it manually. I press tab, it automatically fills out the rest of the file name for me. And then I type the destination. Where do I want it to go? I'm going to copy it to /var. Oh, I'm not allowed to do it because my user account is a standard user. I'm not allowed to put files in the /var directory because it's a system directory. I have to have super user permissions in order to do that. So let's do something different. Let's put it in, we scroll back up here. We can see that there is a subdirectory in my home directory called desktop. Let's copy it to this folder. Enter. And now if I use the cd command to switch into the desktop directory, run the ls command, we see that I made a copy of that file and put it in that directory. Now the cp command, because it's copying, does not affect the original file at all. It takes that file, makes a copy, and puts it wherever it is you told it to copy it to. If I type cd ... do the ls command, you see that project schedule is still there. You can also use the mv command to move a file. Now moving is similar to copying except for the fact that it will get rid of the source file. So in this example, let's move the project schedule file to a different folder. Let's move it to the folder called templates. Because I'm using the mv command, this original copy of the file will be removed. mv project schedule templates. If I run the ls command, you'll see that project schedule is missing. It's no longer in my home directory. But if I go into the templates directory and run the ls command, there it is right there. Now, in addition to cp and mv, you can also use the rm command to manage files in the file system. The rm command is short for, you guessed it, remove. So let's suppose I don't want this file in my templates directory anymore. I want to get rid of the project schedule file. I type rm and then the name of the file that I want to delete. Remove project schedule. Now if I run the ls command, I see that the file is gone. The directory is empty. The last command we want to cover in this demonstration is like a super on steroids copy command called dd. Now dd copies files just like cd does, but it does it in a different way, and it provides you with a huge amount of flexibility. You can copy entire hard disks bit by bit using the dd command. You can't do that with cd. I can copy entire disk partitions with the dd command as well. The syntax for using the dd command is to first use the if option to specify the name of the input file. Which file is it that I want to copy? Now remember earlier we copied the project schedule file to the desktop subdirectory of my home directory earlier. So let's specify /home/rtracy/desktop/project schedule. And then I have to specify the output file using the OF option. Here I specify the full path and file name where I want to copy the file to. So let's suppose that I want to take this file and I want to make a copy of it back in my home directory where it originally resided before I moved it with the mv command just a minute ago. So I specify /home/rtracy and then the name that I want to assign to the copied version of the file. Let's just call it project schedule again. Press enter. Now if I run the ls command, we see that my project schedule file has been copied back to the home directory using the dd command. That's it for this demonstration. In this demo, we talked about how to manage files in the Linux file system. We talked about the pwd command, the ls command, the cd command, the mv command, the cp command, the rm command, and the dd command.
All right, that's very, very useful information on the Linux side. We're not going to go a lot into Linux at PC Pro. You won't see Linux. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, if you do see Linux, it'll be something very, very basic. I would definitely recommend taking a look at the study sheet in 11.5 because the lab doesn't even go over. We'll navigate a little bit with those commands, but we're going to use the permissions command for Linux to run this lab, which he did not go over. And it's not in any of the videos. Well, it is, but I'm going to task you all to, actually it's in 11.5.4, the manage ownership and permissions. As a matter of fact, yeah, maybe we should, I think we should watch that video also, because it'll make more sense what we will perform in the lab. So let's just do that. All right, here we go. It's pretty short.
In this demonstration, we're going to practice managing file ownership as well as file permissions using the chown command and the chmod command. Let's begin by looking at the chown command. Now, as its name implies, the chown command is used to change ownership. I'm going to run the ls-l command here in my user's home directory. I have a file here called project schedule. Now, notice in the output of the ls-l command that the user who owns this file is me. It's my rtracy user. Why? Because I created it. Whenever you create a file in the Linux file system, whatever user account created that file is automatically assigned as that file's owner. Now, there's actually two parts to file ownership. The first part is the user that owns it, and the second part is the group that owns it. Now, on this Fedora Linux distribution, whenever I create a new user account on the system, such as the rtracy user, then a group is automatically created as well. It's named after the user that was created, in this case, rtracy, and then the user that was created, rtracy, is made a member of the group, which is also named rtracy. Kind of confusing, but understand that the second entity is the group that owns the file. The first one is the user that owns this file. Now, this is the default behavior for ownership, but we're not stuck with it. We can change ownership. We do that with the chown command. Now, I'm not actually going to run it yet because there's an important rule you need to remember when managing ownership on Linux, and that is the fact that only the root user, the super user on the system, is allowed to change ownership for the user. I'm going to switch to my root user account using the switch user command. And let's go ahead and copy with the cp command /home/rtracy/project schedule file. And let's put it in another user's home directory /home/ksanders. Okay, so now let's switch into the ksanders user's home directory. We run an ls-l command here. We see that the project schedule file has been copied, but notice the ownership has changed. Up here, project schedule was owned by the rtracy user, but the file that I copied over here for the ksanders user is set to root. That's because we ran the cp command as the root user. So by default, the ownership of the file was set to root. Now, this won't work very well because the permissions assigned to this file will not allow the ksanders user to open this file, even though it's in her home directory. So what we want to do is change the ownership of the file from root to the ksanders user. To do this, we enter chown for change owner, and then we specify the name of the user we want to change ownership to, and then the name of the file, project schedule. Now, if we run the ls-l command, now we see that the ksanders user is the owner of the project schedule file. But notice that the group that owns the file is still set to root. So what we need to do here is run the chown command again, and we want to set the group that owns the file to the ksanders group as well. We can use exactly the same command as we did before, but we have to just add a period right here. This period tells the chown command that the entity that follows the period is not the name of a user, but is the name of a group instead. Now we can see that root no longer owns this file. It is instead owned by the ksanders user and the ksanders group. Now, in addition to managing ownership, you can also manage permissions from the command line on a Linux system. These permissions basically specify who is allowed to do what with the files and folders in the file system. For example, let's switch over to a directory called R&D. This directory named R&D is a shared folder between all members of the research and development team, of which both the rtracy user and the ksanders user are members. Basically, we're going to dump documents into this R&D folder that the users will collaborate on. By running the ls command, you can see that I have a document already in there called widget design specs.odt. This is an open office word processing file. And the idea is that members of the team will open up this file, review the specs, make changes, edits, whatever needs to happen during the design phase of this project that we're working on. Now, let's run the ls-l command and see what permissions have been assigned to this file. We see that the owner of the file is the rtracy user, and the group that owns the file is the R&D group. Now, the idea here is that anybody who is a member of the R&D group will receive whatever permissions have been assigned to that group to this file. Currently, the rtracy user and the ksanders user are both members of the R&D group. So whatever permissions I assign to the R&D group will be automatically inherited by rtracy and ksanders. For rtracy, it doesn't matter as much because rtracy is also the owner and has a separate set of permissions assigned. But the permissions we assign to the R&D group will affect Kay Sanders because Kay Sanders is not an owner of this file. So the only permissions she will receive are those that are delivered by the group membership assignment. Over here in the output of the ls-l command, you can see exactly what permissions have been assigned. The first 3 characters specify the permissions that have been assigned to the file's owner. So the owner has read and write permissions to this file. So our Tracy is allowed to see the file, open it, make changes to it, and save those changes. The second set of permissions, however, here are those that are assigned to the group, R&D. The third set of permissions are assigned to anyone else on the system, anybody who's not the file owner and anybody else on the system who is not a member of the group that owns the file. So the ones we need to be concerned with is this one right here. Remember, we want Kay Sanders to be able to open up this file, edit it, and make changes to it. But you know what? She can't because the members of the R&D group right here have only been assigned read permissions to the file. They have not been granted write permissions to the file. That means the Kay Sanders user will be able to open this file and look at it, but she will not be allowed to make changes and save those changes to the file. And that doesn't accomplish what we want. We want anyone who's a member of the R&D group to be able to open this file, edit it, and save changes to it. This can be accomplished using the chmod command. Chmod stands for change mode. The entire set of these 3 permissions, user, group, and others, is referred to as the file's mode. And every file and every directory in the Linux file system has a mode assigned to it. So we want to change the mode. What do we need to do? We need to grant the write permission to this file. So what we can do is enter chmod, and then we specify the entity we want to grant a permission to. We could specify U to indicate the file owner, the user that owns the file. We could specify G to assign a permission to the group assigned to the file, or if we wanted to, we could use O to specify that the permission assigns to everybody else, to others, those who are not a file owner or nor are members of the group. Well, in this situation, we want to assign the write permission to the group. So we enter G to specify that we're modifying the permissions for the group, the R&D group, and then we enter the plus sign followed by the symbol for the permission we want to add. In this case, what's the symbol for the write permission? W. So we enter chmod G plus W. And by the way, real quick, if you wanted to remove a permission, you would do just the opposite. You would enter minus W, and that would remove the write permission. Well, it's not there, so we can't do that. But if it were, we could. Let's go ahead and add the permission, the write permission in this case. Then we have to specify the name of the file that we want this to affect, the widget design specs.odt file. So we're going to change permissions by adding the write permission to the group or the widget design specs.odt file. Press enter. Now let's run the ls-l command again and notice the change. Now the file owner, our Tracy, has read-write permissions, and anybody who's a member of the R&D group over here will also get read-write permissions to the file. That's it for this demonstration. In this demo, we talked about managing ownership and permissions. We first looked at the chown command to manage which user and group owns a file in the file system. Then we looked at using the chmod command to modify the permissions that are assigned to a file in the file system.
All right. So that will cover. That actually will help you with both this lab and the homework lab. Please, if you need to watch that again, please do. But let's go ahead and tackle this. This is a really quick lab, and you'll see it in a second. It's Linux lab to change permissions. So let me start it here. Where? Okay, so in this lab, it's basically Linux. The sales team uses the sales directory to store documents related to sales, contracts, and orders. Currently, permissions on the directory only allow the users and group owners to view the content of the directory. Users who are not a part of the group owner are unable to list the contents of the directory. As a part of the new company policy to increase teamwork, you want to allow all users to be able to see the sales directory and list its contents. You also want to tell all users open any document inside the directory, but you don't want them to make changes to the document. So we're going to allow the other group, remember he said users group or other, to browse the sales directory. We want to modify the permissions so that all the files in the directory can be open, can be viewed, but not modified. So it's two easy commands to implement or to launch in Linux. So you can see here we're at the root user, the home with the tilde there, and we can do our little pwd, see that we're basically at the root. We can do our ls to list the the files and folders in this directory. And in this one, we do have an executable. But since we're at the root, we can impact any files on the, if we wanted to actually navigate to sales, just to see if you want to use, just to work with your Linux a little bit, if you type in cd/sales, now we're in the sales directory, not in the root, but we're going to go back to the root. Yeah, that's right. It's not going to work with this simulation, so we actually can't use the tilde. We just have to go back to cd root. All right. So our first command, we're going to use change mod, right? And we're using the other group, right? And we're adding read and execute as far as the commands. So I think that's what he wanted. Yeah. Allow the group to browse the sales directory. And then basically we want to put the path and, so excuse me. And that gives us, that will change the permissions from to allow anyone to access the sales and directory in the Linux. And then the next command, we want to actually have them view, give the other group the ability to view all of the content of the sales directory or sales folder. It's very similar. We're just going to change it so that instead of viewing, well, the RX will allow them to open up the folder. So we just want to provide read only, essentially. And we can use a wildcard here to represent all of the files in that folder. And that's in Linux and well, in some cases in Windows too, it's the star. So this will allow a read only scenario for that folder. And so if we, let's see if we can, oops, it's not Windows. You have to include the backslash. So you see that we have, and basically, well, that user, you can't really see here. You'd have to actually go and see what the permissions were before, but essentially you know that we can access that, although you can't really tell, we don't have the login for other users, but so anyway, that's just a brief introduction into the change mod. For your homework, you will have to go through the change that you own, as he announced it, but just it's very, very simple commands. We're not going to dig a lot into Linux. Linux is a whole nother, Linux is actually a whole nother test out course. So this is mostly just a brief introduction. So let's go ahead and score. And yes, we got everything that, and we were able to accomplish this because we used that wildcard. So we have access, read access to all the folders. Any questions? I know you're probably worn out. Okay, so it's 7:25. Let's take a 25-minute break. Let's come back at 7:50, do some packet tracer work. I promise it won't be too arduous. No, Sal, you can't go to sleep. All right, 7:50, we will convene and do some packet tracer, all right? Stand up, stretch, run around the block, do whatever you need to do. But we'll be back here at 7:50. We make it back. Anyone fall asleep? Wanting to fall asleep? Sal, are you awake? All right. All right, I just want to spend a little bit of time just covering what we've done thus far in packet tracer, and then just give you a little bit of a challenge. All right. So as you know, we've had 4 iterations of our little environment here. How many, I think most of you are in pretty good shape. I did recognize that some of you, at least initially, I wasn't sure if your IP phones were working. If you have the IP address coming from your DHCP on your router. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. We are going to go into security a little bit. We'll talk about the firewall and all that. Make sure that you have your serial connection and your ports are on. If you have red here, it probably means that your port's not on your serial connection. Make sure that's on. If that's off, then it will be red. See what else? Any other general questions about our
My serial connection is red, and I've not been able to get it to turn green.
and your port is up on the router?
Let me check.
Go into the router, check your serial ports. Make sure, you can turn them both on, it's not a big deal right now. But that's really the only reason why that would be red.
So it's not on, but I thought we didn't configure our serial connection, the internet. It wasn't configured.
No, you don't need to configure your serial connection. The port just has to be on.
Oh, okay.
It's just serial. So you can configure an IP address and something like that, but it's really not necessary on the serial port. We just need to turn it on, at least for now. And I do want you to be aware that this is our main network of our company. And we're eventually going to create departments and start talking about VLANs and all that. But for now, we're going to keep everything wide open. And this over here is just our little temporary office. Something that we had to set up for temp workers. So this is that office out in the public area. Any general questions?
So I've put it on and I'm still not connected.
Okay. What else? Let's see. You have a 1940. Well, you're gonna have to share your screen and show us.
Okay, I'll do that.
Let your classmates chime in. right, Danielle, good. No, that's on the cloud. Go to your router. Now go back to the serial port. Okay. There you go.
Thank you.
Simple as that. Good job. All right. Any other questions before I give you the challenge? Okay, you can stop sharing. I don't know.
Okay, I'm trying to.
There you go. All right. So here's the challenge. Basically, we want to add 2 more IP phones in the temp area. And there's a caveat. So we want the phones to be ran by our telephony setup. So we don't want to add a new switch. We can't afford to put a switch over there, another switch. I can't use another connection device, and I'll elaborate on that once you've all started. So we want to essentially, and I'll start it here. We want to give our temp workers phones to the outside. We're not going to allow them to bring in their cell. So we're putting 2 phones in here. So not only do we need to have them set up so that they can use it, it has to be ran by our telephony section here. But we're not putting another switch. So how would we configure this? That's the challenge. So the hint is you need something else in here. I do not want you to connect them to the PCs and the laptop. I want you, they need to be ran from our telephony section here. And there's go ahead.
Do we need another router?
No, we're not putting a switch or router in here.
Is it wireless?
No, they're not wireless. These are regular IP phones, just like these. So you're just configuring 2 more phones. You have the router set up to support 5 phones. So you're just going to configure 2 more. And I do not
do a switch.
So just connect them to that to that
Second
router.
switch?
No, I don't want you to add them directly to the switch.
No.
Because we need something else in there to connect to the switch. So what else would you put in there? I'll give you a big hint.
A computer?
Go ahead and put a hub in there. Just a hub. And just to add a definition, a hub is just a conduit. Its main purpose is to move packets from one main source to. So if you put a hub in there, this is just like a doorway.
A hub to the switch and then to the phone.
Wait, where do I find the hub?
It's network devices, and then it's the third one in, hubs. And then there's a hub PT, use that one. It's just a plain hub. And if you open it up, it's really very simple. Just has your RJ45 ports, on-off switch, and power.
I guess I'm not seeing it.
Pardon?
And I believe you're only sharing your screen, the app portion, not the whole thing.
No, sharing, I thought I was. All right, let me do it again. desktop. Share. There we go. So that's a hub.
So where'd you find it though in the menu at the bottom though?
Okay, network devices. And then on the bottom, you have routers, switches, and hub.
Right.
You click on it, it's the first hub in that list of hubs.
I guess mine's set up different.
No, it shouldn't be any different. Click on network devices, and in the bottom row, you'll have routers, switches, and hubs. Click on the hub, and it'll give you the available hubs, and it's the first one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. So which one did you say?
Just the first one, just a very basic hub.
Okay. Thank you.
Hub.
Got it.
Oh boy, it's not muted. Okay. So we want, once again, the challenge is to configure those IP phones using a hub so our temp workers can use them.
Do we have to swap the modules in the hub?
Nope, you don't have to do anything to the hub, but connect to it.
Connect the hub to the switch. Second.
Well, remember, a hub is just a conduit. So the first thing you want to do is just, I'll get you started. Just connect the hub to the switch. You can choose any of the ports on either side. And now your hub is communicating with your switch.
And do we use Ethernet or the gigabit?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep. There's usually one or two things that everyone forgets, even after you're connected. So that's another hint.
Wiring to the hub, right?
Power the phones.
There you go, Ralph. Make sure you power the phones. Get in there. My mouse is not cooperating. I think I need a new battery. Yes, make sure you add power to the phones, or else they will not work.
So the reason for the hub is because you don't want to put another switch, or what's the reason for that?
Yes, the reason for the hub is that we already have a switch in there connecting our temps to our main network. But that's one of the reasons. So we don't want to spend the money for another switch because we really don't need one. We just want a conduit. And the other reason is that we want the phones to be ran from the same system that the other phones are ran from.
But we can't plug the hub to the second switch.
Yeah, but that's not, well, you can, but is that going to provide functionality for your phones from that router?
No.
Okay. So you just, essentially you created a port in there in your temp room to plug your hub in so that you don't have to put in another switch or router.
And we are gonna have to program our hub.
Sorry, what was that question again?
If we have to program the hub or we have to program the router.
The hub does not need to be programmed. Remember, a hub is probably the most generic network device. All it does is pass through packets.
Do we have to do the
We have
setup?
to,
Oh.
we have to set up the gateways and the line numbers on the phones.
Yeah, the CLI.
Yeah.
Not on the phones. You don't do anything with the phones.
On the switch.
How about
Or is it
Not
the
on the
router?
switch.
Router?
we
CLI?
can go? We can connect it directly to the hub, the phone,
Okay.
right?
Yes, so the first thing you want to do is connect your phones to the hub, right?
Yeah,
Switch.
that's what I did.
All right, that's part one. So we know that this hub is communicating with the switch that's communicating with the router.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everything is kosher. So this router should be sending out setup information for these phones.
Yeah.
But there's one additional thing that you need to do. So you have to wait a couple minutes. You should eventually get IP addresses. See, right now we have nothing. But remember that router is pinging, sending out IP addresses, finding in devices. So eventually, and hopefully if it works correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
mine just
I-
linked up. That took
Yeah, I have my IP addresses for him.
Yes. So eventually, if the, so
Yeah.
I
I
have,
got one too.
you have one and it should
Mhm.
get the other. So so that's giving you, you know, your router's working, you know, it's communicating through the hub, through the switch, through the hub to your phones. And eventually you should have both with IP addresses and gateway. But it goes through a weird cycle. See, there we go. So now we have IP addresses and gateways, right? What else do we need?
A line number
And how do you do that?
through the router.
Right.
Configure it.
So remember, this is phone 3 and phone 4. So if you remember your CLI,
The link.
all this fun stuff, remember it's going through its cycle. So you have to go enable, conf, configure terminal, right?
Where are we gonna go?
Where are we gonna go? What do you mean? We're on the router.
Okay, telephony. So,
And so now we need to configure our phones, ePhones, the dash
CLI.
EN
Okay.
3, right?
I've been in here.
Bring us to their configuration for the third phone, and then number 54003.
Router.
54003, enter, right? And then exit out of that configuration. ePhone dash DN, designated number 4. That'll take us to the configuration for the fourth IP phone, and then number 54004, enter. And then you can control Z from here and exit of your router. And if you go to your phones, The numbers aren't set yet. Let's wait, wait. Actually, it shouldn't take that long.
So it was 5004. And what was the other number?
It's just that you're just using the same sequence. So these are 54001, 54001 and 54002. And now those are 54003, 54004. But I did something wrong because the numbers aren't set. All right, did anyone get their numbers to set?
No.
No.
Mine worked.
I got mine.
Carol or Danielle? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
5, 4.
let's try it again. Enable
5.
hit B.
Just keep running.
All right, ePhone dash DN 3. Oh. 3. ePhone DN 3. All right. Number 54003. Enter. Exit. ePhone DN 4. Number 54004.
5. Okay.
Yeah, I think my phones are. My sequence, my phone sequence is. Anyone else get their phones to the numbers to work?
I got mine to work, but I followed exactly what you said.
Yeah, that should work, but our numbers aren't being set, which usually means that the sequence where the phones are configured in the router got changed somehow. And there's really no way to check that. We are getting an alarm.
Mine is just keep moving.
iPhone 6.
Right.
Pardon?
Mine just keep moving.
It's supposed to keep moving. You set it as a JCP, that's fine. You just keep typing.
Okay. I just thought.
Let's see.
Okay. Number.
All right.
Invalid.
I'm going to start over.
4003. Okay. Equal number. Okay. 4, 5, 1.
Okay. Switch. Switches up.
Up, down.
So other than Danielle, who else got it to work?
Stacy.
All right, Stacy, good.
I
Anyone
got
else?
the up and down too.
Pardon?
Yeah, I
Matt,
got mine.
Melba's got it.
Mine's up.
Okay. Good, good. You shouldn't have to do anything more than just configure, once the router sends out the IP address, which you see that it does that right away. Well, not right away, but fairly fast. You should be able to, that means that the router is communicating. You should be able to set the phone number. So phone number 1. My router is pretty slow.
That's all we were doing, right? Was setting the line number on there.
Yep. So once you connect everything, it should pull in the IP address relatively fast. So then you just need to set the line number with those commands on the router. So if you're done, go ahead and save that as part 5 and send that to me. And then that's all we're going to do this evening. And my router's having issues, so I'm getting a phone alarm. I may have to reconfigure.
All right, I have a quick question. So I set my phone number wrong. Would I follow the same prompts to check the phone number or to change it?
Yes.
Okay.
Saya girl, it's bedtime. It's a bedtime.
So any other issues other than my issue? Issue. Okay. Well, I'll continue to work on this, but if you're able to complete our little challenge, then you're done. We are done, or you're done for tonight. Anyone else want to continue to work through it? Yes, please stick around.
Is it e-phone or with an S? E-phones?
E-phone, singular.
Phone.
-DN.
Okay, thank you.
Dwight?
Yep.
This is Halilat. I set my IP phone number the same twice. I don't know how that happened. And I've tried to go back and put in the same commands to change the fourth one, the fourth phone, and it's not changing.
Yeah, it's sometimes that should work, but it is possible that it's not working. Yeah, you're probably experiencing the same thing that I'm experiencing as far as the communication from the router. I'm not really worried about that. I mean, you can just keep it at whatever number you configure. That's fine.
Okay, so I have the same number twice.
Well, that's not good. So you may have to remove the phone and replace it.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Yeah, mine is just not setting the number. Unless for some reason, no, it's supporting 5 phones because it's issuing an IP address. Well, it did. See, I'm having router issues. Oh, there it is. So I'm getting this warning. So at this point, I would go in and redo a configuration dump on the router. And you'll learn how to do that when we get into the networking. We would do a dump and then reconfigure the router for IP DHCP because there is an issue with the line number setting within this environment. But I think most of you were able to get that done, right?
Yes.
Yep.
You didn't have an issue. So you're all smarter than I am. But yes, all you need to do is just connect the router to connect the phones to the hub, and then the hub to the switch. It doesn't matter which type of port. And then it should issue, we know our DCP is working fine because it's issuing IP addresses. But we can't set our line number. So there's either something with the configuration of the router, or that would be the only reason. And I'm getting I'd have to look up this warning because this is essentially stating that the last phone number set is issuing a warning on the little ping cycle, which means I would have to do some type of dump on the router and reconfigure the telephony. All right. Try ePhone DN3. I did, Ralph. And that's, I was just trying to set the number on one of the phones. And that didn't work. Yeah, it's because of this warning, this alarm. Something is locked up on the router as far as issuing line numbers. So I would need to figure that out. You're gonna eat all of that? All right, any other questions?
Oh, this is Carol. I can't get my second phone to work. It won't show on the GUI display.
It won't show what?
The phone number on the display.
Well, that's what I'm dealing with too.
Yeah.
This is usually an issue. Are you receiving any warnings or alarms like this on the router?
I'm looking at it right now. No, I'll try it again.
Yeah, I'm getting IP addresses fine, but no.
Nope, I'm not getting any warnings.
So you said on one of your phones it's not being set?
Correct.
And the other one is fine?
Right.
Yeah. I would try entering those commands again.
Okay.
And if it doesn't work, then it's just not going to work.
All right. Thank you.
And that's fine at this level. at this point, we would be issuing a ticket, having the IT person having you go and check the router configuration. And we're not going to get into that yet. There's a way that you can show the telephony configuration. I don't want to go on that granular detail yet. And the thing of it is, with these routers, you can only check the configuration and then reconfigure, do a dump and reconfigure. And that's usually what they'll do. They'll dump the whole router configuration, go through all the configuration again. They'll do that overnight and then allow the IP address and phone numbers to be issued, which is what I would do. I'll try that after our class is over. Basically, taking that router out and reconfiguring it.
Dwight, real quick question.
Go ahead.
So from the hub to the actual IP phones, you know how when you're connecting it, it says PC or switch?
Right.
What error would you get if you accidentally put it with PC instead of switch?
It would not communicate because
At all?
No, it's
Okay.
looking for a different type of essentially a conduit from the phone to a device for communication. So it would not communicate.
Okay. I was just wondering. Thank you.
And we're going to do that. That's one of the next things we're going to do is connect the IP phone right to the PC. It's very similar, but there's a few more things you have to configure. Because essentially the PC controls of the communication more than the switch. And that, in some cases, you have the phone going to the PC and then the PC right to a special type of router situation, et cetera. But we're not going to get into that. We're just going to use the same type of configuration, but use the PC to control the communication. But I'm not sure what's going on with my router. Yes, as I said, at this point, if we don't have line numbers, which is very important, then you would have to actually reconfigure the router. But I just received just about everyone. Pete, Andrea, no, Melba.
I'm still working on mine.
Ralph.
I started over from last Wednesdays. That way I just redo it all.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I should do that. I think I'm going to start that since we have time. So I'm going to kill the router. Oh, reading the chat. Trying to read the chat. Ping conflict. I could have a ping conflict as well. I don't think so. Just issuing IP address is fine. cheating. I'm not using CLI.
All right, I'm good.
Good. All right.
I don't know where I messed it up, but hey, we fixed it.
All right.
I have mine working. This is Carol.
All right. Good. Good. Getting
Right.
your pardon?
I have a question regarding DHCP and static for VoIPs. Is it better for structuring as DHCP?
Well, yes. Generally, within a network like this, you'll have, well, depending on, well, it really depends on the size of your users, the number of users. If you have thousands of users, then you want to configure DHCP because it'll issue those IP addresses, and you don't have to statically configure them like we used to in the old days. So that's the reason. But if you have a small company of 20 users or something like that, it may be just as easy. But from a telephony scenario, those phones, at least these old 7960s, and they have newer phones now, but those phones, you cannot configure them. They have to be auto-configured anyway. So you have to use DHCP. And generally, you're running DHCP for all of your devices, even if it's a small amount of devices. So I don't know, did I answer your question or did I?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Why?
If I left out a 0 on my phone, 3 and 4, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
It's working.
As long as it's working.
Yeah, I didn't know if I should go and change it.
No, you should just leave it.
All right, thank you.
You may drive some network admin crazy, but you're your own network admin.
And I did notice you switched over to the 2911 rather than the 2811. Is that going to make a difference?
Yeah, these routers, it won't make a difference. All right, what did I forget?
Would it be the max number?
No, that's, you can figure that in telephony service.
Oh, okay.
Could this be a router issue? I'll have to figure it out. It may be that the 2911. Yeah. 'Cause this is all,
To the VLAN 1?
no, VLAN 1's the default VLAN.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It could be that this router is its own gigabit. Yeah. It's not allowing me to do telephony services. Yeah, certain Cisco routers will, yeah, you'll discover that certain Cisco routers are capable of doing certain things. Others, yeah, it may not seem like a big deal, but could be that I simply can't use the 2911 here. And that actually makes sense. I've seen all kinds of issues with, so, come on. All right, okay, pull that. Everyone else is having issues too. Oops. Still have VLAN 1 running on the switch, right? Yeah. There we go. We want to do the max. Max. DM 5. Max ePhones. Five.
Dwight?
Yo.
Yeah, on the phone, the IP address will automatically appear, right?
Yes, if you have the DHCP set.
Yeah. Okay. Because I accidentally closed my, and now I need to repeat it again. It frustrates me. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So who can tell me why I'm not being issued a default gateway? What did I not do on my router?
One of my mistakes was that I didn't follow. I didn't do it the first time through the CLI. So somehow I don't know, but it messed my system up, and that's why I had to redo it again.
I'm redoing everything, and I'm getting the gateway. It's just not assigning me a line number for just one of them. So I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much if it's not assigning a number. Yeah, you're running into, there's a bunch of things that we'll learn how to do to ensure that the DHCP is working correctly. Well, not the DHCP, but the telephony. The big thing now, as long as it's issuing an IP address for your phones, we're gonna go with that for now. Obviously, I'm having an issue because it's not assigning a default gateway, or even though the commands were successful to assign the phone numbers, I must have, I don't remember if I did something out of sequence, but you see that all the links are up and the phone numbers have actually added to the database on the router. They're just not being sent to the phones. So if you have the IP addresses on your new phone, you can continue the work. I'm going to continue the work on mine to make sure at least I get the first two phones. Actually, it's probably best to work with one phone and see if everything is set up correctly, and then begin to add the additional phones. That's another approach as well. So if you're having issues, go ahead and take all your phones out, and then just kind of start over with configure your router and the one phone, and make sure that that phone is configured correctly, and then go from there.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, that's all we have for this evening. Thank you all. We'll do a little bit more on Wednesday, and okay. If you have any questions,
Thank you, Dwight.
you can
This
send
was
an
very helpful watching you do it again.
Good night.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.